I don't even know where to begin. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hit the right keys on my keyboard. I'm using a throwaway account because my wife is an avid Redditor, and if she sees this before I have my ducks in a row, my entire life is over. Or, I guess, what's left of my life. Let me give you the background. I am a 34-year-old male, and I've been married to my wife, Sarah, who is 32, for 5 years. We've been together for 8. Up until 48 hours ago, I thought I was the luckiest man on the planet. Sarah was sweet, attentive, and always played the role of the perfect, supportive partner. But to understand this mess, you need to understand my family dynamic. My biological mother died when I was 10. When I was 12, my dad married Barbara. Barbara is a textbook grandiose narcissist. She came into the marriage with her own son, Kyle. Kyle is her absolute golden child. Growing up, if Kyle broke a window, Barbara would scream at me for putting the baseball in his hand. My dad is a massive enabler who just rolls over to keep the peace. Because of this, Kyle grew up to be a smug, entitled parasite who bounces from one failed crypto startup to another. 7 months ago, my maternal grandfather passed away. He was my rock, my best friend. When the will was read, I learned he left his entire estate to me, including a gorgeous, custom-built A-frame cabin in Colorado sitting on 50 acres of pristine woodland, plus a significant trust fund. Barbara lost her goddamn mind. She screamed at the estate lawyer, demanding to know why Kyle wasn't included because we are all one family. She literally cornered me at the funeral luncheon, her finger jabbing into my chest, hissing that I was selfish and needed to sign half the deed over to Kyle to level the playing field. I told her to go straight to hell and went extremely low contact with her and Kyle. Sarah, my amazing wife, stood by my side. She held my hand, rubbed my back, and told me she would protect me from my toxic family. God, I was so stupid. I was so blind. Fast forward to Tuesday night, 2 days ago. It was pouring rain outside. The wind was howling, rattling the windows of our suburban house. Sarah had gone to bed early, complaining of a migraine. I was downstairs in the kitchen, making myself a cup of chamomile tea. I realized I had left my phone in my car, so I grabbed Sarah's old iPad off the kitchen counter to check the weather for my morning commute. She only ever uses it to read Kindle books, so I figured it was fine. When I swiped the screen to unlock it, it didn't open to a book. It opened to her iMessage app. She had linked her Apple ID to her new phone, and I guess she forgot it synced to this old tablet. There was a text thread open with a contact saved as K Work. Sarah doesn't have a coworker named K. She works in marketing from home. I don't know why, but a knot instantly formed in the pit of my stomach. You know that primal instinct? That sudden rush of cold sweat down the back of your neck? I tapped the thread. I scrolled up, and up, and up, and my entire world completely shattered. It was Kyle, my stepbrother. They weren't just sleeping together. They have been having a full-blown, passionate affair for over a year. The things they said to each other. I can't even type some of them out without wanting to violently throw up. They were making fun of me. Kyle called me a clueless, sterile ATM. See, Sarah and I have been struggling to conceive. I have a low sperm count. We were supposed to start our first round of IVF next month. I've been crying myself to sleep, feeling like less of a man, and she's been comforting me. But the texts got worse. So much worse. Sarah sent a message on Monday at 2:14 p.m. Sarah, just left Dr. Evans. Heartbeat is strong. 10 weeks today. I attached the ultrasound to the hidden folder. I love you so much, baby. Kyle. Fuck yes. Our little bean. Have you talked to the idiot about the renovations yet? Sarah. Working on it. I cried tonight and told him the cabin feels dated and depressing because of his grandpa's passing. I told him if we use our joint savings to completely remodel the kitchen and master bath, it will feel like our sanctuary. Kyle, you're a genius. Mom's lawyer friend confirmed it. Once he uses marital funds from a joint account to improve an inherited asset, it becomes commingled. It turns into marital property. Once the remodel is done, you file for divorce, claim emotional abuse, and force him to sell or buy you out. Half of that estate is ours. Sarah, I know, babe. Just be patient. By next summer, we'll be sitting on the deck of our cabin with our baby, and Jake will be a distant memory. I dropped the iPad. It clattered against the quartz countertop. I literally fell to my knees on the kitchen floor and dry heaved into the trash can. My chest was tight. I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had shoved a rusty knife into my ribs and twisted it. I sat in the dark kitchen for 4 hours, just listening to the rain and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Every second felt like an eternity. I picked the iPad back up. I stopped crying. The sadness just evaporated. It was replaced by a rage so dark and so deep I didn't even recognize myself. I went into her Photos app. I found the hidden folder. The password was our wedding anniversary. How poetic. Inside were dozens of photos. Pictures of them kissing in cheap motel rooms. Pictures of Sarah posing in lingerie I had bought her, sending them to him. And there it was, an ultrasound photo, dated 2 days ago. My wife is pregnant with my golden child stepbrother's baby, and they are conspiring with my narcissistic stepmother to steal my dead grandfather's house. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I took my phone from the car, recorded a video of the entire text thread in the photo album, scrolling slowly so every word was captured. I emailed it to a secure, brand new email address, and then I put the iPad back exactly where I found it. When I crawled into bed at 4 a.m., Sarah rolled over, half asleep, and mumbled, "I love you, Jake." I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I love you too." It is now Thursday morning. Sarah is downstairs making pancakes, humming to herself. She thinks I am a naive, sterile idiot about to write a $150,000 check from our joint account to renovate a cabin for her and her lover. I have a meeting with the most ruthless, shark-like divorce and estate attorney in the city at 2 p.m. today. I've already called my bank and frozen my personal accounts, though the joint account is still active so she doesn't get spooked. I don't just want to divorce her. I want to legally, financially, and socially annihilate them both. I want to salt the earth so nothing ever grows for them again. WIBTA if I play along, pretend to agree to the renovations, but secretly prepare a nuclear revenge to blindside her, Kyle, and Barbara? How do I survive living in the same house as this monster without losing my mind before the trap snaps shut? Time passed since last post. 5 days. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night since I last posted. Every time I close my eyes, I just see those texts floating in the dark. But I'm still here, and the gears are in motion. Thank you to everyone who reached out. Your anger gave me the strength to get through this week without completely losing my mind. Let me tell you about my Thursday afternoon meeting with the divorce attorney. Her name is Diane. She's a 60-something, silver-haired powerhouse who drinks black coffee and looks at you like she's calculating the exact monetary value of your soul. I sat in her plush, mahogany-paneled office, my hands sweating so much I was wiping them on my jeans every 5 seconds. I slid my laptop across her massive glass desk and played the video of the iPad texts and the hidden ultrasound folder. Diane didn't gasp. She didn't show an ounce of pity. She just watched the whole 5-minute video, leaned back in her leather chair, and smiled a smile that chilled me to the bone. "Well, Jake," she said, tapping her gold pen against the desk, "your wife and her lover are legally literate. I'll give them that. In this state, an inheritance is solely yours, unless you commingle it. If you had transferred even $1 from a joint account to pay for a contractor on that cabin, or if she contributed sweat equity by helping you paint the walls, she could argue it became a marital asset. By the time the divorce finalized, you would likely have been forced to buy out her newly acquired equity or sell the property entirely." Hearing a legal professional validate the plot out loud made the room spin. I literally had to put my head between my knees for a second so I wouldn't pass out. Diane immediately gave me my marching orders. First, I was to quietly open a new individual checking account at a completely different bank. I rerouted my direct deposit from work there starting next pay cycle. Second, I hired a private investigator that Diane recommended, a grizzled ex-cop named Mike. Third, and this is the hardest part, I had to go home and play the role of the excited, supportive husband. I had to agree to the renovations to keep Sarah completely docile while Diane drafted the divorce papers and Mike gathered the final nails for their coffins. Do you know how hard it is to smile at the woman you love when you know she is incubating your stepbrother's child and plotting your financial ruin? It is psychological torture. Friday night was the absolute worst. Sarah made my favorite dinner, steak and garlic mashed potatoes. We were sitting at the kitchen island, the ambient pendant lights casting a warm, deceptive glow over our home. "Honey," Sarah said, reaching across the marble counter to stroke my hand, "I was looking at some Pinterest boards today for the cabin. What if we knock down that wall separating the kitchen and the living room? Make it an open concept. It would be so perfect for entertaining. Or, for when we finally have a little one running around. My stomach violently rejected the food I had just swallowed. The sheer audacity, the absolute evil of her looking into my eyes, bringing up our infertility struggles, and using a hypothetical baby, Kyle's baby, to manipulate me into signing away my dead grandfather's legacy. I squeezed her hand back. I forced my lips to form a smile, though my cheeks were to see about moving the funds from our joint savings into a dedicated renovation account. Her eyes literally lit up, like a predator seeing a wounded deer. "Oh, Jake, I love you so much," she cooed, getting up to kiss my cheek. I spent the next 20 minutes in the downstairs bathroom with the shower running, just silently screaming into a bath towel. But it gets worse. Oh, it gets so much worse. Yesterday, Mike the PI called me. He had been tailing Sarah for 3 days. He sent me a secure file containing 50 high-resolution photographs. On Saturday afternoon, Sarah told me she was going to a book club brunch with her girlfriends. The photos proved otherwise. Mike followed her to an upscale bistro downtown. She wasn't meeting her girlfriends. She was meeting Kyle. And sitting right across the table from them, sipping a mimosa and holding a little blue gift bag with tissue paper sticking out of it? Barbara, my stepmother. Mike had managed to get a table close enough to record a snippet of audio on a directional mic. The audio quality was scratchy, but I heard it. I heard Barbara's voice. "You just make sure he signs those contractor agreements before you start showing, Sarah." I cannot wait to see the look on his smug little face when he realizes Kyle gets half of that old man's estate after all. It's only fair. My stepmother, the woman who watched me cry at my father's wedding when I was 12. She orchestrated this. She is actively coaching my wife on how to steal from me to enrich her golden child. And my dad? I don't know if he knows. I pray to God he doesn't, but right now, I trust absolutely no one. Here is the plan. Tomorrow, Sarah hits the 11-week mark of her pregnancy. She has been dropping heavy hints that we should host a big family dinner next Sunday at our house to reconnect with my dad and Barbara after the tension at the funeral. She claims she wants to be the peacemaker. I know exactly what she's doing. She and Kyle want to use this dinner to announce the pregnancy to the family, pretending it's an IVF miracle that happened naturally. They want to corner me in front of my father, play the happy family card, and use the joyous momentum to formally present me with the joint account renovation checks they've already drawn up. I told Sarah I loved the idea. I told her to invite everyone. My dad, Barbara, Kyle. I even told her to invite her parents who are flying in from out of state. They think they are walking into a celebration. They think they have won. What they don't know is that Diane has finalized the divorce petition. She has also drafted a comprehensive eviction notice for Sarah, as my name is the sole name on our primary residence's deed. I bought the house before we married. I have rented a massive projector screen. I told Sarah it's for a slideshow of my grandfather's life to honor his memory before we renovate his cabin. I am going to burn their entire world down next Sunday. I will update you all when the ashes settle. Wish me luck. Time passed since last update. 2 weeks. It is done. The bomb has been dropped. My hands are still slightly trembling from the adrenaline dump, but for the first time in almost 3 weeks, I can finally breathe. Grab a drink, Reddit. This is going to be a long one. The day of the dinner, a massive, oppressive heat wave had settled over the city. The air outside felt thick and suffocating, exactly mirroring the atmosphere inside my chest. I spent the entire morning setting up the dining room. Sarah was in her element, buzzing around the kitchen in a floral sundress, roasting a prime rib, and humming along to a Spotify playlist. She actually had the audacity to kiss my cheek while I was folding napkins and whisper, "Tonight is going to be perfect, Jake. The start of our real future." "It really is," I replied. I didn't even flinch. I had completely dissociated. The man she was talking to was already a ghost. At 4 p.m., Sarah's parents, Tom and Nancy, arrived. They are sweet, deeply religious people who have always treated me like a son. They had no idea what they were walking into. At 4:30 p.m., the doorbell rang again. My stomach completely bottomed out. My heart started beating like a war drum against my ribs. I opened the door, and there they were. My dad, looking tired and carrying a bottle of wine. Barbara, dripping in cheap gold jewelry and wearing a smug, tight-lipped smile. And Kyle. Kyle was wearing a fitted polo shirt, looking around my house like he was already measuring the drapes. Hey, bro, Kyle said, slapping my shoulder a little too hard. Smells good in here. Ready for a big night? I just stared at him. I stared right into his eyes and said, "You have no idea." Dinner was agonizing. I sat at the head of the table, cutting my meat into tiny, microscopic pieces, listening to the clinking of silverware and the sickeningly sweet banter. I watched the secret, knowing glances exchanged between Sarah, Kyle, and Barbara. Every time Sarah poured wine for the guests, she pointedly poured herself sparkling cider, making sure everyone noticed. Finally, after dessert was served, the trap snapped. Sarah tapped her fork against her water glass. Ding, ding, ding. "Excuse me, everyone," Sarah said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. She stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "Jake and I invited you all here because we want to mend fences. We know the last few months, especially since Grandpa passed, have been tense, but we have a miracle to share. Despite everything the doctors said about Jake's struggles, we are pregnant." Tom and Nancy erupted into cheers. Nancy started sobbing, throwing her arms in the air. My dad gasped, his eyes filling with tears. "Oh, my boy," he cried out. Barbara and Kyle played their parts perfectly. Kyle clapped politely while Barbara dabbed her dry eyes with a napkin. "And," Sarah continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket, "to celebrate this new life, Jake and I have decided to completely renovate Grandpa's cabin, to make it a home for all of us. I've already drawn up the check from our joint account for the contractors." She slid the check onto the table in front of me. $150,000. The room was buzzing with joy. I stood up. I didn't smile. I picked up the check, looked at it, and slowly ripped it perfectly in half. Then I ripped it into quarters. I let the pieces flutter down onto my half-eaten slice of cheesecake. The dining room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. "Jake?" Sarah whispered, her smile faltering. "What are you doing?" "I have a presentation," I said. I picked up the remote for the projector I had set up at the end of the dining room. I clicked the button. The massive screen rolled down over the window. I clicked the remote again. The room plunged into dimness as the projector beamed to life. The first slide was a beautiful, high-resolution photo of my grandfather holding me as a baby. "My grandfather," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room, "was an honorable man. He built that cabin with his bare hands. He left it to me to protect." I clicked to the next slide. It was a massive 10-foot-tall screenshot of Sarah and Kyle's iMessage thread. The text was highlighted in bright yellow. "Just left Dr. Evans. Heartbeat is strong. 10 weeks today." I attached the ultrasound to the hidden folder. "I love you so much, baby." And Kyle's response, "Fuck yes, our little bean. Have you talked to the idiot about the renovations yet?" Nancy let out a blood-curdling shriek. The wine glass in my dad's hand shattered onto the hardwood floor. Sarah physically recoiled, stumbling backward into the buffet table, knocking over a vase. "Jake, no! Wait, it's not. It's out of context," she shrieked. I didn't stop. I clicked the remote again. Next slide. The photo of Sarah and Kyle kissing outside the cheap motel. Next slide. The ultrasound photo. Next slide. The PI photos of Sarah, Kyle, and Barbara sitting at the bistro with the blue gift bag. Then, I pressed play on the audio file. The scratchy, undeniable voice of my stepmother blasted through the Bluetooth speakers I had hidden in the corners of the room. "You just make sure he signs those contractor agreements before you start showing, Sarah. I cannot wait to see the look on his smug little face when he realizes Kyle gets half of that old man's estate after all." Chaos. Absolute, unadulterated chaos. Tom, Sarah's father, turned a shade of purple I have never seen before. He lunged across the table, grabbing Kyle by the collar of his polo shirt. "You son of a bitch!" Tom roared, spit flying from his lips. "You knocked up my daughter?" Kyle panicked. He shoved an elderly man backward, sending Tom crashing into a dining chair. That was the trigger. My dad, my quiet, enabling doormat of a dad, suddenly snapped. He let out this primal roar, vaulted over the shattered glass, and shoved Kyle so hard my stepbrother went flying backward into the drywall, leaving a massive dent. Barbara started screaming like a banshee. "Get your hands off my son! He's just taking what's rightfully his! Jake is a sterile piece of garbage who doesn't deserve that money." I stood at the head of the table, perfectly still, watching the destruction. Sarah was on her knees, clawing at my pant leg, mascara streaming down her face in thick black rivers. "Jake, please, please. It was a mistake. I love you. He manipulated me." I looked down at her, the woman I had slept next to for 8 years. I felt absolutely nothing. No sadness, just disgust. "Get your hands off me," I said. I stepped back, and she fell face first onto the rug. Suddenly, the front door opened. I had left it unlocked. In walked Diane's hired process server, flanked by 2 uniformed off-duty police officers I had hired for private security. "Sarah, maiden name?" the server asked, stepping into the dining room. Sarah looked up, paralyzed. The server dropped a thick manila envelope right onto her lap. "You've been served," I told her. "Those are divorce papers, and underneath them is a formal 30-day eviction notice. Because my name is the only name on the deed to this house, and you have 0 legal equity. However, I'm not waiting 30 days for you to leave my sight. You have exactly 15 minutes to pack a bag and get the hell out of my house, or the officers here will escort you out for trespassing." Barbara lunged at me, her acrylic nails aiming for my face. "You little bastard. You can't do this. That baby is entitled to child support. Half that house is Kyle's." Before she could reach me, one of the off-duty cops intercepted her, grabbing her by the arms and spinning her around. "Ma'am, step back right now or you're leaving in handcuffs," the officer barked. My dad was standing in the corner, holding his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. He looked at Barbara, then at Kyle, and finally at me. I didn't know, Jake," he choked out. "I swear to God, I didn't know." "I know, Dad," I said softly, "but you brought these parasites into my life, and now they are leaving." I turned back to Sarah, who was wailing so loudly the neighbors must have heard. Her parents, completely horrified and disgusted, refused to even help her up. Tom looked at her, shook his head, and said, "Don't call us. We are taking the first flight home tomorrow." They walked out the front door without another word. For the next 15 minutes, the house was a flurry of pathetic scrambling. Sarah, escorted by one of the officers, threw clothes into a suitcase while hyperventilating. Kyle and Barbara were physically escorted off the property, screaming obscenities from the sidewalk until the cops threatened them with public intoxication and disturbing the peace charges. When Sarah finally dragged her suitcase to the front door, she stopped. She looked at me, her eyes swollen and red. "Jake, where am I supposed to go?" "Ask K-Work," I said, and slammed the heavy oak door right in her face. The lock clicking into place was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my entire life. It is now 2 weeks later. Sarah is living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment with Kyle. She tried to drain our joint account the morning after the dinner, but she was too late. I had already legally moved exactly 50% of the funds to my private account, leaving her with her half. Not a penny more. She has tried calling me from 50 different numbers. I haven't answered a single one. All communication goes through Diane. Barbara filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming emotional distress from the dinner. Diane laughed so hard she choked on her coffee when she read it. It will be thrown out immediately. I'm sitting in my living room. The dent in the drywall is still there, but the house is quiet. The air is clear. The cancer has been cut out. I know the divorce proceedings will be a nightmare, but they have absolutely no leverage. The prenup. Oh yes, I had a basic prenup to protect premarital assets, and the ironclad inheritance laws in my state are shielding me. I will update you one last time when the ink is dry on the divorce papers. Until then, I'm going to pack my car, drive up to Colorado, and sit on the deck of my grandfather's cabin, alone and free. Time passed since last update, 2 years. I am writing this final post sitting on the wraparound cedar deck of my grandfather's cabin in Colorado. The air up here is crisp, smelling of pine needles and fresh mountain snow. I have a mug of black coffee in my hand, and for the first time in over 24 months, my chest doesn't feel like it's wrapped in barbed wire. A lot has happened since that explosive dinner party. I promised you all a final update when the ashes settled, and Reddit, the fire burned everything down to the bedrock. Grab a comfortable seat. Let's talk about karma. The divorce proceedings were a bloodbath, and my lawyer, Diane, was the apex predator. 2 months after I kicked Sarah out, we had our first mediation session. It was held in a sterile, glass-walled conference room in Diane's downtown firm. The air conditioning was cranked so high it felt like a meat locker. I sat next to Diane, wearing a tailored suit, feeling completely numb. Sarah walked in looking like a ghost. She was about 5 months pregnant at this point, wearing a baggy gray sweater, her hair pulled into a messy knot. The dark circles under her eyes looked like bruises. She couldn't even make eye contact with me. Her lawyer, a tired-looking public defender type she had hired out of desperation, sat next to her, shuffling papers. "Let's make this quick," Diane started, not even offering them coffee. "My client is offering a clean walkaway. You keep the $75,000 you took from the joint account. My client keeps his premarital home, his retirement, and his inheritance. No alimony, no spousal support. You sign today, and we don't file the civil suit." Sarah's lawyer cleared his throat. "Now, Diane, be reasonable. My client is expecting a child. She contributed to the household for 5 years. We are seeking a 50-50 split of the house's equity and 2 years of rehabilitative alimony." Diane didn't even let him finish. She reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a thick bound dossier. She slammed it onto the glass table. Smack. "What you are going to do," Diane said, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "is advise your client to take the deal. Because if you push for 1 red cent of my client's money, I will formally submit this dossier to the judge. It contains time-stamped text messages, audio recordings, and photographic evidence of a deliberate, premeditated conspiracy to commit marital fraud and embezzle an inherited asset." Diane tapped her manicured fingernail on the cover of the dossier. "In this state, conspiracy to defraud a spouse out of non-marital assets through deceptive commingling can be referred to the district attorney. I will drag your client, her lover, and her mother-in-law through a criminal investigation so fast it will make your head spin. So, counselor, are we signing, or are we going to war?" Sarah's lawyer physically paled. He looked at the dossier, then looked at Sarah, who was openly weeping into her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. He leaned over, whispered furiously into her ear for about 3 minutes, and then slid the settlement papers toward her. She signed. With a trembling, cheap plastic pen, she signed away any claim she ever had to my life. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. But what happened to the happy couple? Oh, reality hit them like a freight train. With Sarah's $75,000 settlement, Kyle convinced her to let him invest half of it into a new, totally going-to-the-moon crypto venture he and his tech bro friends were launching. Because Kyle is and always will be a moron, the venture collapsed completely within 6 months. The money vanished into thin air. By the time the baby, a little boy, was born, they were completely broke, living in a dingy 2-bedroom apartment. And here is the thing about golden children like Kyle. They like the idea of a prize, but they hate the work of maintaining it. Taking Sarah from me was a fun game. Stealing my inheritance was a thrilling plot. But waking up at 3 a.m. to a screaming infant in a cramped apartment with a sobbing, postpartum girlfriend and an empty bank account? That wasn't fun anymore. When the baby was 4 months old, Kyle went out for a pack of cigarettes, and quite literally never came back. He abandoned her. He drained the remaining $10,000 from their new joint account, packed his golf clubs and his PlayStation, and fled to Florida to crash on a friend's couch. Sarah was left completely alone with a newborn, facing an eviction notice of her own. She tried to go back to her parents, Tom and Nancy, but they had gone completely no contact with her. Their religious community had found out about the affair and the pregnancy, and the shame was too much for them. They moved to a smaller town 2 states over and changed their numbers. Sarah is now working as a receptionist at a dental office, living in government-subsidized housing, trying to claw child support out of a man who works under the table and jumps states to avoid being served. 6 months ago, she sent me a 3-page email from a new address. It was pathetic. She wrote about how much she missed my smell, how Kyle ruined her life, how she made the biggest mistake in human history, and begged me to just meet her for a cup of coffee. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my spam folder, blocked the address, and went back to eating my breakfast. She is a stranger to me now, a ghost I used to know. And what about Barbara, the architect of this entire nightmare? Well, my dad finally grew a spine. The night of the dinner party broke something inside my father. Watching his wife actively root for my financial ruin and watching her son destroy my marriage finally shattered the fog of his enabling. When they got home that night, Barbara tried to spin it. She tried to gaslight him, screaming that I had set them up, that I was cruel. My dad just walked into their bedroom, pulled 2 suitcases from the closet, and started packing. "I am done, Barbara," he told her. "I failed my son when he was 12 by bringing you into his life. I will not fail him again." My dad filed for divorce the very next morning. Because they had been married for over 20 years and their finances were completely entangled, it was a messy split. But my dad forced the sale of their 5-bedroom suburban house. He took his half of the equity and his pension, and he moved into a quiet, modest townhouse near a fishing lake. Barbara, suddenly stripped of her enabler and her lavish lifestyle, ended up in a tiny, outdated condo on the bad side of town. From what my dad tells me, she spends her days posting passive-aggressive quotes about loyalty and toxic family members on Facebook, while fielding calls from debt collectors because she keeps taking out loans to send Kyle money in Florida. As for my dad and me, we are healing. It took a long time. For the first year, I barely spoke to him, but he started going to intense individual therapy. He wrote me a 12-page letter taking absolute accountability for his years of enabling, for every time he let Barbara emotionally abuse me, and for his failure to protect me. Last Thanksgiving, I invited him up to the cabin. I had finished the renovations. I used my own money, my grandfather's money. I knocked down the walls just like I planned. I installed massive floor-to-ceiling A-frame windows that look out over the snow-capped peaks. I put in a huge Riverstone fireplace. It is my absolute sanctuary. My dad walked in, took off his coat, and just stood in the center of the living room, looking up at the exposed wooden beams my grandfather had carved by hand. He broke down crying. He hugged me tighter than he ever had in my entire life, sobbing into my shoulder, repeatedly whispering, "I'm so sorry, Jake. I'm so proud of you. He would be so proud of you." We sat by the fire that night drinking bourbon, and we didn't mention Sarah, Kyle, or Barbara once. We just talked about Grandpa. Which brings me to today. I sold the suburban house. I couldn't walk through that kitchen without seeing the ghost of Sarah making pancakes, hiding her betrayal behind a sweet smile. I took the massive profit from the sale, quit my high-stress corporate job in the city, and moved to the cabin full-time. I do freelance consulting now, working remotely from my deck, watching the deer graze at the edge of the tree line. As for the infertility, I started dating a wonderful woman named Elena about 6 months ago. She is a local wildlife photographer. She is fiercely independent, fiercely loyal, and she doesn't care about my money. On our third date, I told her about my low sperm count. I laid all my cards on the table, terrified she would walk away. Elena just smiled, reached across the table, took my hand and said, "Jake, there are millions of kids in the foster system who need a safe home and a dad who will fight for them. When we're ready, we'll build our family. Biology doesn't make a father, love does." I knew right then and there that I had found my real partner. To everyone who commented, who raged with me, who told me to get a shark of a lawyer and to stay cold when the fire was burning, thank you. You kept me sane when I was standing on the edge of the abyss. I survived the absolute worst betrayal imaginable. They tried to break me. They tried to steal my future. And they tried to desecrate my grandfather's memory. But they failed. I kept the cabin. I kept my dignity. And most importantly, I kept my soul. Signing off for the last time. Stay strong, Reddit. The truth always comes to the light.